Hello, welcome to Crafting at CCPL. My name is Katrina, and this week we are going to talk about the history of crochet. Over the last 2 weeks, we have learned how to do basic crochet stitches and how to make a granny square. So I thought it would be interesting just to learn a little bit more about that craft. So we'll get started. In the English, French, Belgian, Italian, and Spanish languages, crochet is pronounced as crochet. If you say that in all of those different languages, they will understand what you mean. However, in Dutch, it is haken. In Denmark, it would be hackling. In Norway, it is hekling. And in Sweden, it is virkning. So those are different names for crochet around the world. Crochet was developed in the 1500s. It was known as crochet lace in France and chain lace in England. However, there are examples of possible crochet techniques earlier than that in Arabia, South America, and China. There was an early form of crochet. It was called tambouring, where you actually used small hooks and you used an embroidery hoop, and you would do the chain stitch but through the material on the actual embroidery hoop, and you would form those into, like I said, chain stitches, and then the fabric was removed and you had similar to what would be Battenberg lace today. It was also known as crocheting in the air. Crochet became known in Europe when a French woman, and I will totally probably butcher how to pronounce her name, but we'll go for it here. It's Reggio della Branchaudière. So she translated the old bobbin lace patterns into crochet patterns. She also claimed to have invented Irish crochet, which is a little different, a little more intricate than what we are doing today in crochet. But she is the first one to have actually developed patterns, and they were based on patterns that were used for bobbin lace. During the Irish potato famine from 1845 to 1850, the cottage industry was crochet for many people. That's how they survived through the Irish potato famine, was they would work in their homes, the whole family would, crocheting the lace that was then very fashionable to wear around the collars and the cuffs of the upper class individuals. The fancier clothing and things had the lace edgings, and those were all crocheted. So those were crocheted many times by people who were struggling through the potato famine in Ireland. When many of those people immigrated to the U.S., to North America, they brought that skill with them, and that's when crochet became known more in the U.S. One German publication in 1847 actually only had you crocheting on one side, which is really, really interesting when you think about that, because when we were crocheting, if you remember, on our basic stitch crochet that we did, not so much the granny square because that's going around and around, but if you remember with our basic stitches, we would go across one row, turn our work, and come back again. And apparently the original crochet, they didn't do that. They literally went across, cut their thread, went back across, cut their thread, and then had to weave all of those ends in at the end. They only would crochet on one side of their work. And today, as I showed in the lessons, we go through both loops when we go through a stitch. We pick up through both loops. Originally, that was not the case. Back in the 1800s, it was standard to go through the back portion of the stitch only and not the front, which creates like a ridge across the front. But it was standard to only go through the back loop, whereas today it's standard for us to go through both loops. The earliest written patterns that we have are 1824. And Tunisian crochet was popular during the Victorian era. The Tunisian crochet is a crochet hook with a cable that comes out, like a plastic tubing that comes out the end and goes around. It has like a plug or a bead at the end, It's kind of a mixture of crochet and knitting. And so it was popular during the Victorian era. It kind of died out during the 1920s, and then it had a revival period during the 1970s, and it's still being done today. It's just not one of your more popular crafts that involves a crochet hook. So now I'm going to talk about the different types of crochet hooks and the history of the crochet hook itself. The very first crochet hooks were made during the 1845 to 1850, and this would have been the type that were used during the Irish potato famine. And the crochet hooks back then were pretty much a bent wire, bent with any kind of wire they could get hold of, or twisted wire, and it had a cork on the end of it to hold the chains from falling off the other end, or to give you some type of a handle. That was what the original crochet hooks were made of. The fancier people at the time, or the more wealthy people during the 1840s up until 1901, had crochet hooks that were very elaborate. They were made out of ivory, bone, tortoise shell. They were very ornate. You can still find them, but they're very rare that you would come across them. I'm thinking that maybe they broke easily, or who knows. But anyway, you don't find them very often any longer. Interchangeable hooks became popular in 1923. Now, an interchangeable hook means that the handle stays the same, but you can change the size of the hook portion, or shank itself, and it just untwists. These are not interchangeable. I don't have any interchangeable. But yeah, this part, which is the shank part, would just unscrew, and you would attach different tips to it and screw it back together again. So that became an invention in 1923. In 1932, they started making the lacquered aluminum hook. So before that, all of your hooks were just silver. They were just steel colored. So they started lacquering them. This was discontinued in 1935. And in 1935, they also came out with the first plastic hooks. Now, I do have some plastic hooks, and you can still buy them today. Most people don't really care to use them because we find that the yarn doesn't slide easily on them. But if you buy a kit, guaranteed it's probably going to have a plastic hook inside. I do have a couple plastic hooks. In fact, one right here. Here's a plastic hook that actually came in a kit years ago, and doesn't say who it's made by. But yeah, this is a plastic hook, and they're usable, but I don't care for them because I find that where the actual hook is, right here, it tends to catch a lot, just get bent up easy. Now, before 1942, a lot of the steel hooks were nickel plated. They stopped making nickel plating and aluminum hooks during World War II because those materials were needed for the war effort. So those were not used between 1942 and 1945. But the interesting thing is they were coating crochet hooks with a black lacquer stuff. So if you run across some antique hooks, if you find them, like if a family member gives them to you, or if you find them at flea markets or whatever, they're not worth a whole lot, but they're just kind of unusual because they were only made during a specific time during World War II. So if you have black crochet hooks, you know exactly what time period those are from. Back in 1945, after the war, they resumed nickel plating. And then the colored aluminum hooks, you'll notice some of my hooks, and I'll hold a few of them up here. They're in different colors. And these are aluminum, and they have a coating. That became an invention in 1949. So if you have colored hooks, you know that they do not predate 1949. So now I'm going to show you a couple of my hooks that are different types that are out there. There is your standard metal hook. The sizes of your hooks are usually right on here, which is a flat portion. It's what you would hold, no matter which direction you hold. That's the flat area that you use, and that's going to have your sizing on it. And so I have a couple of the just plain metal ones. This one's actually losing some of its color because it's been used a little bit. And then I have some old metal ones that I had that I used polymer clay, and I wrapped them just to make them a little bit more ergonomic, because these, especially the small ones, can be really hard on your hands after a while. They just don't have as big of a grip. So I put these. One problem I learned by putting polymer clay on them, I covered over top of the size section, so I have to check a size gauge to double check the size on these different hooks. Now I also have, and this one's funny, I would not recommend one of these, but I have, it's a plastic hook, and just wait for it, here's the exciting part, it lights up. Now the purpose, you might say, I feel like E.T. phone home. You may wonder what the purpose is of a light up crochet hook. If you are crocheting, or even if you were knitting with dark yarn, it's very hard to see the stitches. So like if you're doing, like navy blue, black, dark burgundy, any dark color, dark brown, sometimes it's hard to see. And some people like to crochet at night that they don't want to wake up their spouse, and they crochet, or they're crocheting in the car and it's dark, so they use these. I cannot imagine, it's like, it reminds me of Tinkerbell Firefly running around all over the place, so I don't think I'd be crocheting in the dark with this, but yeah, anyway, the one thing I don't like about this is I do notice, let's see, the top is loose. They're not real sturdy right here where the seam is. So they're not something I would ever buy again, but it's something unique. Now my favorite crochet hooks are these, and these are the ones I've shown in my videos. I bought these off of eBay. You can get them off of Amazon. eBay's probably the cheapest. I have, I think, maybe 6 or 7. They came in a set. It was under $10 on eBay. And they have the size written actually here. It's just, it's like incised into it, etched into it. But this is like a rubber grip. And I find these are the most comfortable. They don't fall out of my hands. And I have them in quite a few sizes. You can see here. So I have 1, 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 in here. And they're all different colors, so I can identify them easily. Like I said, these are my favorites. I do have some antique ones, which I think are kind of interesting. And these were given to me by a lady at my church. And this is they were in a metal cigar wrapper, or container. And I didn't really want the cigar thing on the outside, so I put washi tape around it just to pretty it up a little bit. But they're in a metal container because they are so tiny. And these are antique hooks. And the way I can tell, here they are. These are all metal. None of these are the black ones I talked about. But some of them, let's see if I can find one that has it on here. These are all Boye, B-O-Y-E. They have a price on them. Some of them actually have etched, like this one. You can't see it because it's so tiny. It has 15 cents on here. And I looked them up based on the prices, and they date to the 1950s, 1940s, 1950s. But if you can see, they've got extremely tiny hooks on them. And these tiny hooks are for doing doilies with. So you can also use them for repairing sweaters, things like that. But because they're so pointy, I keep them in the metal case. It just protects them and me from poking myself with them. So I thought I would end my crochet history tutorial by showing you some crochet doilies that my grandmother made. She was the crocheter in the family. I did not learn how to crochet from her, sadly. But let me show you some of her crochet work. This one has a stain on it I need to work on. It's got a candle that some of the wax stripped on it. But there is this one. And this one is a 2-color one. I have others of hers around the house, but I'm just going to show you a few. There's this one. I'll move it close so you can see it. And then this is one I made, and it's a unique one. It's kind of a contemporary doily. It's in the colors my kitchen is in, and as you can see, it is not circular. It's kind of a pinwheel shape. It's called a fractal doily. So I hope you have enjoyed this series. Stay tuned next week because we're going to do something really exciting next Monday night. We are going to dye yarn. So you can come and watch me destroy my kitchen as well, hopefully not, but I have dyed yarn before, and it can be a lot of fun, but it can be a little messy. So yes, come and watch the entertainment as I dye yarn in my kitchen with Kool-Aid. Yes. So it's yes, edible dye. So make sure to tune in next Monday night, and we'll do a little science experiment together. Thanks again for watching.